Here is Pink and Say by Patricia Polacco. See in this very first picture here that here is Pink's mother. Here's Pink. Here's Pink's mother putting his hat on, saying goodbye. You can see some other people looking quite sad that he's leaving. Look at the way their home looks. You can see that they were slaves. This is what slave quarters would have looked like where they lived. Here's Say going away as well. His family saying goodbye to him. When Sheldon Russell Curtis told this story to his daughter, Rosa, she kept every word in her heart and was ready to retell it many times over in her long lifetime. Sheldon had been injured in a fierce battle and was left for dead in a muddy, blood-soaked pasture somewhere in Georgia. He was a mere lad of 15. He lay there for 2 days, by his reckoning, only to slip into unconsciousness and fever. He was rescued from the field by another lad who had also been separated from his company. I will tell it in his own words, as nearly as I can. You can see that Say has been shot. He has a bullet wound here above his knee. And here's Pink. I watched the sun edge towards the center of the sky above me. I was hurt real bad. For almost a year, I had been in this man's war, the war between the states. Being just a lad, I was wishing I was home. My leg burned, and I was angry from the lead ball that was lodged in it just above my knee. I felt sleepy, and everything would go black. And then I would wake up again. I wanted to go back to our farm in Ohio, and sometimes when I'd fall into one of them, those strange sleeps, I would be there with my ma tasting bacon powder biscuits fresh out of her wood stove. Then I heard a voice. For a moment I thought I was fever dreaming, but then I felt strong hands touch my brow, splash water on my face. Being here, boy, means you gotta be dead, the voice said, as he gave a drink from his kit. Where you hit? Because if it's a belly hit, I gotta leave you here, he said. I had never seen a man like him so close before. His skin was the color of polished mahogany. He was flying Union colors like me, my age maybe. His voice was soothing and his health was good. Hit in the leg, I told him. Not bad if I don't go green. Can you put weight on it? He asked, pulling me up to my feet. We gotta keep moving. If we stay in one spot, marauders will find us. They'll ride and drag and looking for wounded. Next thing I was remembering was collapsing in a heap on the ground and rocking with pain in my leg. Everything started to go black, and then I remember him pulling me up on his back. I heard him saying, Lord have mercy, you as bad off as I am. I'll tote you. I can't rightly leave you here. I remember being pulled and carried and stumbling. I remember hard branches snapping back in my face and mouths full of dirt as we hit the ground to keep from being seen. I remember slogging through streams, hauling up small bluffs and belly crawling through dry fields. I remember things in a half-sleep-like way, but I do remember being carried for a powerful long way. Then the fever must have took me good, because I could feel a cool, sweet-smelling quilt next to my face. Soft, gentle, warm hands were stroking my head with a cool, wet rag cloth. Look at that morning that's coming, a woman's voice said as she spooned oat porridge into me. Do your mama know what a beautiful baby boy she has? Where am I? Is this heaven? I asked. She tossed her head back and laughed. Oh, no, child. Pincus brought you home to me, don't you remember? The mahogany child, I thought. Both you children been on the run for days, and a miracle God Almighty brought you back here. Yes, indeed, child, a miracle. I remember thinking, could this war have been so close to this lad's home? I couldn't imagine having a war right in my backyard. I looked over and I saw him looking out the window. I guess you don't remember much, he said. I'm Pincus A. Lee, fought with the 48th Colored. Found you after I got lost from my company. My name is Sheldon. Sheldon Curtis, I said weakly. This is my mother, sweet, sweet Momo Bay, he said as she smiled at me. Lord, Lord, I never thought I'd see my dear boy again, she said as she hugged him. I've been getting along, though, Pincus. Warm things got left in the big house when the family left, dry goods, too, and the rest I've been getting from the woods. There's a freshwater spring, still have some chickens, and even got an old cow out back that still gives. Then you've been here all alone? Pincus asked his mother. Where is everybody? Your daddy runned off to fight about a month ago, and all the hands and their children run off out of harm's way, but I stayed. I prayed to the Lord every day. My prayers were surely answered because he brought my baby back here to stay, she said as her face beamed. You ain't never going to leave your mama again, are you, child? She said softly. Pincus looked troubled and didn't answer. I'm going down to the stream and pound out these clothes of yours, she said as she ready to leave. If you hear marauders coming, you get for the root cellar door and stay down there till they's gone. That's what I've been doing. Marauders? Here? Pincus said with alarm. They've seen there's nothing here for them, child, nothing. As soon as she left us, Pincus sat by my bedside. Sheldon, boy, as soon as you heal up, we gotta get away from here. We're putting Momo Bay in great danger just by being here. If they come and find that she's been holding troopers, he trailed his voice off. We gotta get back to the outfits if we can find them. You mean back to the war? I asked. I must have gone pale as he went on to say, It's the only way, ain't it? Then he looked at me. Sheldon, are you all right? You look bothered, he said as he eased me back. You can call me Say, I said. Everybody in my family calls me Say, not Sheldon. I expect you're my family now. Near enough, he said, as he chucked the blanket under my feet. You can call me Pink, he said softly, and he smiled. For the next week, Momo Bay fed us up both real good. Raw milk and cornbread never tasted so good in all my born days. It were the first time in months my victuals didn't have any mealy worms in it. She saw to it that I tried to walk a little bit every day. So that mean-looking leg don't go stiff on you and cripple you up, she'd say. This place wasn't that much different from our farmhouse in Ohio. More poor, maybe, but it smelled the same, like pine boards and good cooking. A mess of beans with salt pork, cornbread, greens, and onions. When we slept, she sat near us, stoked the fire, and watched over us. Never thought I'd feel safe enough to sleep deep again. My mother and Kalo, my father, jumped the broom on this very spot, Pink said as he walked me on my first day outdoors. And that there was the master's house. Master A. Lee, Pink spoke quietly as he helped me along. How come you have his last name? I asked. Boy, when you owned, you ain't got no name of your own. Even Kalo had to take that name. As we rested under the willow tree, Pink asked me about my family back home. Got one brother still at home to help run the place for Pa, I answered. What was your outfit again? Pink asked. He asked me before. Ohio 24th? I carried the staff. Wasn't supposed to carry a gun, but then so many of us died, even boys had to carry after so many were slaughtered like hogs. At least you got to carry. In the 48th, we couldn't have guns at first. We fought with sticks and hammers and sledges. Can you imagine not trusting us with our own fight? I couldn't imagine such a thing. They didn't give any of the black soldiers guns. They didn't trust them to have guns. So they just had to have hammers and things like that. I can't even imagine that. Then when they finally did give us muskets, they were so old they were from the Mexican-American War, and they jammed and misfired. But how in God's name can you want to go back, I asked. Because it's my fight, Say. Ain't it yours too? If we don't fight, then who will? I had no answer for him, but God forgive me, I did not want to ever go back to it. After a few more days, I could walk a little steadier, but I needed help. Pink took me out to the big house and walked me through it. Weren't much left of it, really. It was mostly burned out. Master A. Lee had a library full of books right here, he said. He taught me to read, even though it was against the law. He must have been a good man, I said. More bad than good, say. Sometimes I think he just liked being read too. There was this book on of poetry, say, that was this thick. Every night I'd read out loud to him from that book. I blessed this house because of all the beautiful books, but I cursed it too for what it stood for. We walked a bit farther. To be born a slave is a heap of trouble, say. But after Ailey taught me to read, even though he owned my person, I knew nobody ever could really ever own me. You feel hot, Pink, I said. Lord, I think you're as sick as me. Let's fetch you back to the house. I'll be fine, boy. I'm just a little tired, that's all. I'm ready to fight, though. I'll be ready to fight. So Pink has some sort of fever. That night after we ate, Momo Bay came back to the table with a worn-out old Bible. She was so happy. My heart ached at the thought of telling her that we'd be leaving soon. Master A. Lee showed him how the paper talks. Show him, Pink, she said. He took out a pair of spectacles from his pocket and opened up the Bible to the Psalms of David and started to read. His voice was steady and had such wonder. Just hearing them words made the pictures come into my head. I surely do wish I could read, I announced without thinking. So, Master A. Lee taught Pink to read, but Say never learned how. You had to be educated at this time. It wasn't just that black people were not taught to read. Some white people were not either. If you were not a wealthy person, you wouldn't have the luxury of learning how to read. And a lot of people did not know how to do that at that time. When Pink saw I was ashamed, he took my hand. I'll teach you. Say, someday I'll teach you. I could feel my face flushing up, and then I spoke up. I done something important, I announced. Well, of course you have, child, of course you have, his mother said. I touched Mr. Lincoln's hand. It were near Washington. We were quartered there just before Bull Run. The president himself was shaking everyone's hands, and I just put my hand right out. And he took it? Pink asked. Yeah, he took it. And now that's a sign, isn't it? He said, smiling broadly. Touch my hand, Pink. Now you can say you touched the hand that shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln. Next best thing to touching him, Momo Bay said in wonder. Most of the next day, Pink was studying an old map. Marauders don't fan out farther than 30 miles or so from their camps. So if they come here with their units, it must mean that they're getting close. We got to get south of the river. See, here, say, that's where my troops were headed. We can meet up with them about here, I figure. Meet up with who? You ain't leaving. His mother's voice was caught as she came upon us. Now, my mother, you knew we couldn't stay. You had to know that, he said as he tried to calm her. No, my babies, my dear babies, she cried. She was inconsolable for a time, and then she sat still and feared and just listened. Mother, this war has to be won, or this sickness that has taken this land will never stop. Pink always called slavery the sickness when he talked. We have to go. He knelt at her feet. But the look that came into her eyes, she'd known this day was coming. I could feel my breathing catch. My chest was so heavy. My hands were sweating. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew I had to tell Pink something, but I just didn't know how. That night I couldn't sleep. What's wrong, child? Momo Bay said from her chair. I don't want to go back, I blurted out. I know, child, she said. Of course you don't. You don't understand. I took up and I run away from my unit. I was hit when I was running. I sobbed so hard my ribs hurt. I'm a coward and a deserter. She looked at the fire and said nothing for the longest time, and then her voice covered my cries. You ain't nothing of the kind. You are a child. A child. Of course you are scared. Ain't nobody at that. That ain't. I'm not brave like Pink. I'm not brave. Child, being brave don't mean that you ain't afeared. Don't you know that? I don't want to die. There's worse things than death, child. But you got nothing to fear. You're here now. I'm hugging you up. You're going to be an old man someday, and when it's your time, the sweet Lord will send a hummingbird to fly your soul to heaven. Now, you ain't afeared of hummingbirds, are you? Her words brought me sweet sleep. That night I dreamt of hummingbirds and green pastures full of sunlight and wildflowers. The next morning we mustered to leave. We packed cornbread, salt pork, and dried beans. I would have done just about anything to stay, but my place was to go with Pink. I owed him that. And just as we were making the last sweep of the place, making sure that there were no signs of us ever being there, we heard wild screams and shrieks coming from the woods. Marauders, Pink said as he grabbed a piece of wood for a club. Momo Bay took it from him. You get in the root cellar. They ain't gonna have no truck with a old dark woman. You get in that cellar, you hear? We didn't like it, but she pushed us. Hurry afore they're here. She lifted the root cellar and shoved us in. Don't come out until I tell you. We heard the porch steps creak, and she ran from the cabin. She's drawn them off, Pink whispered. When the marauders came in, my heart was pounding so hard. I was sure that they could hear it above us. There was a terrible commotion as they ransacked looking for food. There was a silence, and a single shot echoed through the trees outside. They let out a war whoop and they thundered off. We waited for a sign from Momo Bay, but it didn't come. Finally, we climbed out and ran outside only to see Momo Bay lying beyond the porch. We put you in their way by staying here, Pink cried as he rocked her in his arms. Her eyes were looking in a faraway place as he closed them. Your son loves you, Momo Bay. Your son loves you. And he sobbed as he kissed her. We both held her hand until there was no more warmth in it. After we buried her under the willow tree, we set out. Pink figured we were 3 days' walk from Union troops. He watched the movement of the sun. Her words still rang in my heart, her words about being brave. My steps were as sure now as they had ever been since the war started. We walked in the open, clear as a country stroll until the morning of the second day, and then we knew that we were being followed. Take these, Pink said as he took his spectacles from his pocket. If they catch me with them, there'll be trouble for sure. When they caught up to us, one yelled at me, Where are you going with that darky boy? I was afraid to answer because of my northern accent. I would be dead sure that that would give us away. Boy, what outfit you a part of? The leader barked. I couldn't answer. You a Union boy? One jeered as he pulled my uniform from my knapsack. No, I ain't Yankee. I got that from a dead one, I sputtered, trying to convince them. But that was when we were grabbed. My words had given us away. We were prisoners of the Confederate Army. We were held up in a barn that night. Pink shivered with fear. I held him as he had done for me. The next morning, we were thrown into a boxcar. We rode for what seemed like 2 days, stopping many times. When the door slid open, the daylight was blinding. We were loaded into a buckboard and taken through town. The townsfolk looked hard at us. They had left us for what mean looks and a heap of hate. We jarred to a stop in front of the gates that marked the entrance to a stockade. It says Andersonville, Pink whispered. My heart stopped. I have heard of this place. It was one of the worst Confederate camps. When we were pulled from the buckboard, we fell hard to the ground. No! No, I begged as they pulled us along. Because of his fever, Pink stumbled and fell. They dragged him along with such meanness. He did not protest until they forced us in different directions. Then he reached to me and said, "Let me touch the hand that touched Mr. Lincoln. Say just one more time." I watched tears fill his eyes, cleaved my hand into his. As they wrenched us apart, they smote him and dragged him away from me. He looked back at me and tried to say something more, but they crossed his back with a knotted hemp and pushed him along. Sheldon Russell Curtis was released from Andersonville prison some months later, weighing no more than 78 pounds. Andersonville was built to only hold 10,000 prisoners, but by the end of the war it held 33,000 soldiers. There was no fresh water, no shelter, and no food. 13,000 men and boys died of starvation and dysentery. Sheldon Curtis returned home and recovered. He settled in Berlin Township in Saranac, Michigan. He married Abigail Barnard and fathered 7 children. He became a grandfather and great-grandfather during his long lifetime. He died a very old man in 1924. Pincus A. Lee never returned home. For him, there was to be no wife, no children, no grandchildren to remember him. It was told he was killed within hours after he was taken to Andersonville. I know this story because Sheldon Russell Curtis told his daughter Rosa. Rosa Curtis Stowell told her daughter Estella. Estella Stowell Barber, in turn, told her son William. And then he told me, his daughter, Patricia. When my father finished the story, he put out his hand and said, "This is the hand that has touched the hand, that has touched the hand, that shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln." This book serves as a written memory of Pincus A. Lee, since there were no living descendants to do this for him. When you read this, before you put this book down, say his name out loud and vow to remember him always. Pincus A. Lee. Say it with me. Pincus A. Lee. The end.